Have you ever thought what a world without war would look like? Well, it certainly wouldn't resemble the world we live in today. Sometimes we declare war against social ills or injustice that needs defeating, like poverty. But more often than not, our wars end up doing more harm than good. We've got war in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Syria, just to name a few. A new Cold War is brewing with Russia, and we're waging economic and cyber war with China. And when something is defined as a war, violence is often touted as the only solution. But if George Orwell's 1984 taught us anything, war, no matter which war that is not meant to be won. It's meant to be continuous. The principal enemy of the state conspiring against Big Brother writes, a hierarchical society is only possible on the basis of poverty and ignorance. The war is waged by the ruling group against its own subjects, and its object is not the victory over either Eurasia or East Asia, but to keep the very structure of society intact. While it comes from a work of fiction, this statement couldn't be more accurate in describing the United States' addiction to war. America has been engaged in acts of war for 223 out of the 246 years of its existence. That's 93% of the time, with just 21 years of peace. This endless cycle of war has helped to create the largest empire the world has ever known, a dubious distinction if there ever was one. Now listen to this. The U.S. military budget for fiscal year 2015 was $615 billion. For an idea of scale, consider this. The military budget was $9 billion more than 2014. That's still 3 times that of China's and 6 times more than Russia's military budget. And our nation, which has 1,000 military bases or more dotting the globe, is deploying more and more special operation troops to assist foreign militaries with known records of human rights abuses, more often than not without congressional approval. But how have we become a nation built and sustained by war? Here to explain how war has become embedded in the American psyche and folded into our everyday fabric is David Swanson, author of War is a Lie and renowned peace activist. Check it out.
Well, I think the founding fathers of the U.S. government were a mixed bag, some more opposed to war than others, but I think they got at least some things very much right in the Constitution. For one thing, they were very intent and explicit about giving the power to make war to the Congress, to a body of representatives, rather than a single individual, rather than a president who they expected would wage war after war after war. They were very clear about this in their discussions. They also were writing in a very different time where the military-industrial complex was not what it has become, and they wrote the Constitution with the expectation that the United States would have minimal, if any, standing army on a permanent basis, and they gave the Congress the power to raise an army for a period of 2 years if needed for a war, and so forth. We now, of course, have a military that is permanent and standing in 175 nations, and I think they would at least be amazed to see such a thing. But the revolution, was advocated for here in Virginia and elsewhere in order, among other things, to allow U.S. expansion west, to seize territory and lives from the Native Americans. And so the Constitution and the creation of the United States was very bad news for the natives of this continent, who were going to continue to die in an ongoing genocide from that point forward. And in fact, the United States has been at war most of its existence from day one. And changing that is going to require changing our society more fundamentally than just amending the Constitution or abiding by it.
Right. And now the second edition of your 2010 book, War is a Lie, comes out in March. What has happened in the past 6 years that has prompted this second edition?
Well, war after war after war, more military spending than ever before by the United States under President Barack Obama, the dramatic expansion and continuation of a war in Afghanistan, for which the president recycled some of the lies from Iraq about the surge and the success in Iraq. Meanwhile, back in Iraq again and Syria, we have seen wars with no congressional input whatsoever. President Obama telling Congress at the last State of the Union that he would wage war in Syria and Iraq with or without them, and they're cheering for that and funding it. The war in Libya intentionally waged without any input from Congress. And we have seen some developments, good and bad, in terms of public understanding of militarism and the desirability of wars and the lies about wars. So when in 2013, President Obama and the White House said we must have missile strikes in Syria that were in fact going to be a massive bombing campaign of Syria, and you must do this or support poisoning children with chemical weapons. I mean, this was a really hard sell, but the people of the United States said no, and that public resistance here and abroad was a big factor in stopping that. But the arming and training of militants in Syria that was even less popular continued and escalated. We did see last year resistance to destroying the nuclear agreement with Iran on the part of warmongers in Congress who preferred war to a nuclear agreement with Iran. And that was a defeat also of the Israel lobby, which was incredible and unprecedented. So there are reasons to be confident about the progress of the public's understanding of war lies, and there are reasons still to be deeply concerned.
Well, I'm really glad you mentioned that. I mean, what does it mean to say war is a lie? I mean, how do our current legislative processes protect this lie and allow it to continue?
Well, it does not mean war doesn't exist. It means that everything we're told that justifies war is a lie. Everything that explains a war as beneficial to its victims or necessary or inevitable is a lie. Everything told to keep a war going as if it's in support of the troops somehow and to escalate it and to make it look better after the fact is a lie. The lies that we're told about how wars were necessary as last resorts have to be exposed. There was a study this past year that found that when you ask Americans about a war and tell them there are alternatives, they are much less supportive. But when you tell them there are no alternatives or you don't say a word, they are quite supportive. And that suggests that people are assuming that the U.S. government has tried everything else. So it's important to point out to people that it has never tried everything else, that it has gone out of its way to avoid opportunities for peace in Syria, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and everywhere else that it has chosen to wage wars, including drone wars, which are another new development in the past half decade.
And David, you talk a lot about ending war, but what exactly does a world without war look like? I mean, is it really possible?
Well, it's certainly possible. I'm not predicting it one way or another. A world destroyed by nuclear holocaust is increasingly likely, which is part of why we must move away from war. We also must move away from war because we need those trillions of dollars to be put into other measures to protect us from other dangers we've created, including climate chaos and environmental destruction. If we had the resources that are being dumped into preparations for war, about $1 trillion by the United States alone every year, we could work wonders in terms of giving the United States everything that Michael Moore says it should have in his movie about the good things in Europe. We could give foreign nations actual aid, not military aid, many times what they are given now, and make the United States loved and appreciated rather than hated and feared. We could invest in green energy on a scale that its advocates don't dare dream of if we moved away from war, and we would have conflict still, and those conflicts would have to be settled nonviolently, using the rule of law, using diplomacy, using boycotts, divestment, and sanctions. But we do not need to have war. It is not the norm. It has been the exception through human history and even more so human prehistory. We can choose to get rid of it, and we're going to have to soon, or as the saying goes, it may very well get rid of us.
Well, thank you so much, David, for joining us today, author of War is a Lie. Hopefully we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.